Hello viewers, in this video I want to introduce you to web development with frameworks and show you why they are such a powerful tool you might want to consider before or while working on new projects. This video is mainly targeted towards beginners that are new to web development up to intermediate front-end and back-end devs who want to get an overview on frameworks. First of all, let's talk about web development in general. Web development can be split into two main task areas. Backend development focuses on the code that is responsible for the data usage and the application's internal data routing. Possible routes could be server to host, database to server, or server to client routings. These, as well as all requests that come in via user inputs, are handled in the backend. Therefore, code is required to maintain user requests. This is made possible via code written in languages such as PHP, Python, Java, and many others. The other main task area is called front-end development. In this case, development focuses on design, layout, and the interactable parts of the application. The ideas and concepts that were created by the designers in form of sketches are now virtualized and become an accessible application. The structure and the interface then run in the browser. Coding is mainly done in JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. A developer that combines both of these task areas in one person is called a full-stack developer. Let's come back to these frameworks I talked about earlier. They are a platform that enables developers to perform software development on. This basic foundation can contain helpful tools to create programs. These tools come in form of predefined functions, classes, or even as hardware and input managers. There is no need to write every small piece of code yourself, so why not use a framework to get on track with your projects even faster? Sometimes people confuse application programming interfaces, also called APIs, with frameworks, but APIs basically make the tools of a framework accessible for the user. Combining APIs with libraries, a compiler, and other helpful extensions will create a framework. So now let's talk about the different frameworks that you might want to take into consideration when working on your next web app project. First, let's talk about backend frameworks. Depending on your use case, you can choose between a rather wide range of backend frameworks. I will present to you two of the most used ones. First of all, there is Express.js, which is a widely used and known framework. Therefore, it has a large community behind it, which can always be consulted for advice and infos during development. It is highly compatible with other frameworks and is used even by big companies like Uber, Accenture, and IBM. There are large open source resources such as plugins, but also fully fleshed out applications to look into. For example, Keystone, which makes web application creation super easy, via loads of predefined functions and classes. The compatibility aspect of Express makes it easy to use with a wide variety of libraries to organize code better and make development more convenient. Bootstrap and Stormpath are some useful examples to look into. However, building a new project without exact plans from scratch might not be advisable with this framework, because of its requirement of middleware to communicate with servers. It is more advisable to use it with software to monitor real-time events or when communication between different systems is planned or already in place. One example which is more of a library is Dino's Opine, which is heavily influenced and inspired by Express, but you can get it up and running really fast. It also provides a very simplistic and basic foundation to get started with serving your application to the web in an instant. Opine supports, just like Express, with a slightly different syntax, the use of functions acting as middleware. With these, you can, for example, easily implement any static files like text documents, pictures, or even front-end applications developed in Angular, Vue, or React. For the second backend framework, I choose Django to present to you. Since processing and making use of data became more and more relevant in the past decade, Google and Instagram are just some examples of big companies using Django as their framework. Words like big data, data science, and data analysis are often used these days in regards to process optimization and a better understanding for efficiency of all kinds of different systems. The Python-based framework Django provides a very solid base for connecting to and reading data from all kinds of databases via a model view template architecture. This architecture can be split into 3 different layers. In the model layer, the actual relations and requests from and to the database are handled and are then viewable as datasets in the view layer, where the business logic is analyzed. From the template layer, the user inputs come into the view layer, which handles data manipulations such as deleting, updating, and the creation of data. This data is then forwarded to the model layer and given to the user. The data will then be shown on a display in the template layer. Although being a very powerful framework for data analysis programs, it might not be the best choice for fast single-page applications, since Python is one of the slower and more resource-demanding languages out there. Now we come to our front-end frameworks, and it is hard to talk about these without mentioning Angular, which is probably the best-known front-end framework for single-page development out there. It started as AngularJS, which is now outdated, and is now written in TypeScript, which is together with HTML the main development language. Angular is well equipped and suited for stable application response times, even on larger scale projects. As for the basic structure, Angular uses a kind of building block structure, which enables easy management of the application. These blocks are called ng modules. They help organize different functionalities of different parts of the code. These modules contain the used component, the service provider, routing pipes, as well as other scope-defining attributes. Last, but definitely not least, we have the rising star Vue, an independent JavaScript-based framework. When Vue started to grow in relevance and popularity, it did it really fast, with a large and very passionate open source community behind it to show off today. Vue was, and is, from its launch date in 2014 up until today, a community-driven and independent framework without any giant monitoring corporation behind it. The basic program structure is the same as for Angular, but faster with lower system load and easier to get into, but in the end more suitable for smaller and fast single-page applications. Very valuable plugins are provided by the community, such as Vuex, which enables all featured components to know the current state of all other included components to react accordingly, and with fewer interferences between them. But since a large percentage of the user base is of Asian ethnicity, a considerable amount of the documentation is written in Chinese, which makes it somewhat harder to find info compared to Angular. Programming with this framework and its high flexibility makes it rather difficult for big teams with big projects to maintain a unanimous coding style, since it supports a wide variety of different developing styles. But let's have a look at one of the most interesting features that come with a Vue installation, the so-called Vue directives. Vue directives are Vue-specific functions which enable you to target specific goals without worrying about how to actually implement them yourselves. Vue script itself is very fast and easily set up. With only a few lines of JavaScript, you can start using Vue directives. The conditional Vue-specific functions we take a look at are vif, velse, and velsif. Inside of our div tag in the HTML, we have different elements that load on different conditions. Therefore, they will only be rendered for the user in certain scenarios. In this example, we render a user overview panel on the conditions admin, user, or else, login or register, respectively. Depending on the user input, the conditioned element is then rendered, and if the condition is not met anymore, these elements are automatically destroyed. We can also implement a feature like this via modal panels through the use of vshow, which will render conditionless on the user screen and will force the user to make an input. in order to proceed further. Examples for these modal windows are login windows, but also lately more frequently used for pop-ups known as cookie agreements. The modal window is then always rendered in front of the content via CSS. Major differences between these two methods are the computational cost, which is generally higher for the conditional method, but the actual rendering cost is higher for the vShow method, since this element has to be fully rendered all the time and will just be toggled off and on through CSS. For the conditional method, all components will be automatically destroyed after failing to meet any condition. That concludes my framework overview. I hope I was able to show you that it is highly efficient to include a framework into your web development projects, and thank you very much for watching.